Alright, so we've learned how to do inequalities, solving inequalities. Now we've learned how to do absolute value equations. Now we're kind of combining absolute values and inequalities into one problem where we're dealing with absolute value inequalities. So we have problems where we have an absolute value in them and a greater than, less than, different sorts of signs like this. So we can solve these equations just like we can solve the other topics that we've already covered. There are two types of absolute value inequalities that we're going to be worried about. One's where there's a greater than sign, so absolute value of x is greater than some number, and one where it's less than some number. So depending on these signs, and I could put lines under here, it wouldn't change anything. The greater than types and the less than types have their own rules. In this video, we're going to focus on the first type. So we are focusing on the ones where it's greater than. So I want to look at a couple examples here. And the instructions on this problem down here ask us to solve for x. So we're taking the absolute value of a number, and our answer is bigger than 6. There are two situations here. Think about what kind of numbers on your own would work here. One possibility is that they could be numbers that are bigger than 6. Like if I plug in a 7, absolute value of 7 is 7, that's bigger than 6. If I plug in a 52, the absolute value of 52 is bigger than 6. So numbers that are bigger than 6 are going to work here. On the other hand, there are also negative numbers that work. If I were to do like a -2, for example, that would not work because the absolute value of -2 is +2 and 2 is not greater than 6. But if I did like a -10, -10, when you take the absolute value, you get a +10, and that is bigger than 6. So the other possibility is we want things on a number line to the left of -6. So the left of -6 means when you take the absolute value, you're going to get an answer that's bigger than 6. The way I write that is x is less than -6. And either of these things could happen, so what I'm going to do here is put the word or in between. It could be this or this. So that kind of leads us into the big takeaway from our absolute value problems with greater than. I want you guys to write down on your notes the phrase more than or. More than meaning pretty much the same thing as greater than. If you see a problem where its absolute value is greater than or more than a number, it's going to be an or problem. You need to actually have that little or in your answer. You'll lose a little bit of credit if you don't. It's either this or this. You'll find in the next video that and problems are when you have less thans. More than though, greater than, it's going to be an or problem. So on the second problem right here, if you look at this problem and think about it for a second, it should make some of you guys, well hopefully all of you guys, a little uncomfortable. We have an absolute value and we have a negative. That's not a good thing. Absolute values and negatives don't mix very well. So I'm looking for a number that when I take the absolute value of it, my answer is bigger than -4. Any number that you can possibly think of, pick your favorite number in the entire world. If you take its absolute value, it will be bigger than -4 because absolute values are always positive. So I can plug whatever I want in here. Any number ever, a real number ever made. And when you take the absolute value, it will always be bigger than a negative. It's going to be a positive answer. So the answer to this problem here is actually that all real numbers that we talked about earlier. So there's the symbol, or you could actually write out in words, all real numbers. So I'm going to write that down as a note for you guys at the bottom here to take away with this. When you have absolute value of x is greater than a negative, its answer is all real numbers. Anytime you're doing an absolute value problem and you see it equals or it's greater or it's less than a negative, you need to pause, and the regular rules aren't going to work. You have to figure out what's going on. In this particular situation, when you have it's greater than a negative, it's all real numbers. So I want to work through 2 more problems in this video. Practicing, now that we've seen how they work, I want to show you the basic method we're going to use on bigger problems like these. So, if you notice, I guess I'll pull this back up for just 1 second here. What happened here? This was almost like 2 bars, 2 equations, except obviously they're inequalities. The first one just looks the same. The second one still has that negative answer, like before, but the difference is that sign got turned around. If you can understand what I just said right there, that's basically what's going to happen on these problems. You are still going to do the 2 bars, 2 equations, although now there are 2 bars, 2 inequalities. Once you have the absolute value by itself, it's all by itself. You break this guy up. 2x plus 4 greater than 14. Just leave it as is, positive 14. And for the second branch, you do 2x plus 4, and you'll do a negative 14 over here, just like normal. But the thing is, you put a negative there, so we're going to flip that sign around and make that a less than, like this. So, still break it into pieces. First one the same. When you do your negative one, you flip that sign around, and that's the only difference. Probably want to make a note for yourself, so when you look at this later, you'll remember that. You did a negative, so you're going to flip that sign. Now, it's just a matter of solving these two parts. So you just do the math. You get 2x, subtract 4 from both sides, divide by 2. You get x is greater than 5. More than, so it's or. And this one, I divide by a positive 2, so I do not flip that sign. This is my answer. So I have two solutions there. On the next problem, we're taking the thing we already learned how to do. We learned how to do these problems with the lots of pieces, with equations. Now we're going to do it with inequalities, same way. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. Those go away. I just get negative 2, absolute value, less than negative 9 minus 1 is negative 10. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2 to get that out of here. I divided by a negative though, so I do need to flip that sign. So I get absolute value 6 minus x is less than 5. Oops, sorry. I forgot to said I was going to, but I forgot to actually do it. Greater than 5. I divided by a negative, so I flip my sign. Now I'm going to go ahead and do my 2 bars, 2 equations. Write it down as is. And write it down. Again, don't change the inside, but flip that sign. We'll do negative 5. And then you just solve. So on this guy right here, we divide both sides by negative 1 to get x by itself. We get x is less than 1. Or, and on this part, we get negative x less than negative 11. Divide both sides by negative 1. We get x is greater than 11. So there are my two solutions, and I am done.